If you went to dental school any time in the last 20 years, you probably have a specific rule burned into your brain: 2 millimeters. You were taught that if you place composite resin thicker than 2 millimeters, you are committing a sin. You were told that shrinkage stress would pull the cusps together, the bond would fail, the bottom layer wouldn't cure, and the patient would end up with sensitivity or recurrent decay. So, like a good student, you graduated and spent years painstakingly placing multiple layers of composite: cure, layer, and then cure. But then you started seeing ads for bulk fill composites, 4 millimeters, 5 millimeters, and you probably felt a conflict. Part of you thought, I would love to save time, I would love to be more efficient. But the other part of you, the part that remembers your professors yelling at you, thought, is this lazy dentistry? Am I cutting corners? Is this stuff actually as good as a traditional way? Or am I compromising my quality just to save 5 minutes? Today, we're going to put those fears to bed. Welcome to another edition of The Research Says. I have combed through the systematic reviews, the meta-analysis, and the clinical trials so that you don't have to. We are going to answer the definitive question: is bulk fill composite actually as good as incremental layering? And the answer might save you hundreds of hours of clinical time over your entire career. So welcome back, I'm Ryan Smith, DDS, and my goal in this channel is to help you build a dental career that is fun, rewarding, and fulfilling. And a huge part of this is efficiency. If you're spending an hour on a procedure that should take 30 minutes because you're using outdated techniques, you're hurting your profitability and probably your mental health. But we never sacrifice the standard of care for speed. Speed is a byproduct of mastery, not a substitute for quality. So let's look at the data regarding bulk fill. To understand if the material is safe to use, we have to understand why we were terrified of bulk placement in the first place. And the fear stems from two main things: polymerization, shrinkage stress, and the depth of the cure. So let's talk about the shrinkage stress first. When composite cures, obviously it shrinks. We all know this. If you put a massive blob of old school composite into a box preparation, that material shrinks and it pulls on the walls of the tooth. And that's the C factor. If the bond strength is lower than the shrinkage stress, the bond will fail. You get a gap at the floor of the box, you get micro leakage, and then you get post-op sensitivity. That's the physics that we were taught. And for traditional composites, the physics is 100% correct. However, the mistakes dentists make is assuming that bulk fill composite is just regular composite, that people are being just lazy with. It isn't. The chemistry is fundamentally different. Manufacturers didn't just tell you to pack more in, they re-engineered the resin matrix. Bulk fill materials utilize what are called stress-relieving monomers, or modulators. In plain English, this means that when the light hits the material, it stays flexible for a fraction of a second longer during the curing process, which dissipates the stress before it pulls on the walls of the tooth. But theory is one thing, clinical reality is another. So does this actually work in the mouth? Well, let's look at the specific studies, because if you want to feel confident in this, we've got to dive in. Now, first we have to look at the work of Van Dijken and Pallesen. Hard names to pronounce. But if you are a dental nerd, you might know these names. They've conducted some of the most robust long-term randomized clinical trials on this exact topic. And in one of their landmark studies, they followed a large group of patients for 5 years. They used a split mouth design, which is the gold standard. That means in the same patient, they did one filling with a traditional layering technique and another filling with a bulk fill technique. They looked at the class 1 and class 2 restorations. They used deep boxes, heavy occlusion, and then real-world dentistry. After 5 years, what did they find? Well, they found absolutely no statistically significant difference in the annual failure rates between the two groups. The bulk fill restorations performed just as well as the layered ones regarding the marginal integrity, the recurrent decay, and also any fracture resistance. So at the 5-year mark, the lazy technique held up just as well as the normal meticulous technique. But that is just one study group. Let's zoom out and look at the aggregate data. There is a major systematic review and had a meta-analysis published in the Journal of Dentistry. It aggregated data from multiple randomized clinical trials, comparing high viscosity bulk fill composites against conventional layering. Well, what was their conclusion? Bulk fill composites showed similar clinical performance to conventional composites. There was no difference in retention, no difference in marginal adaptation, and crucially, no difference in post-op sensitivity. That's the main point. Many dentists fear that a huge bulk of composite will cause sensitivity. And the meta-analysis that they just say otherwise. If your patients are having sensitivity, it's likely an issue with your adhesive protocol. It may be your isolation or your occlusion. It's not because you filled the hole all at once. So the science here is pretty clear. The chemistry does work, the stress relief does work, and the long-term survival is comparable. But I want to flip the script for just a second. We spend so much time criticizing and scrutinizing bulk fill and asking if it's safe. We rarely stop to ask if incremental layering is actually risky at times. We assume layering is the gold standard, but layering also has its risks too. Every time you place a layer, you have to manipulate the material. You have to pack it, you have to adapt it. Every layer is an opportunity to trap an air void between the increments. Every time you go back into the mouth with an instrument to place the next layer, you are risking contamination. You're risking saliva or blood getting into the box while you're messing around with your second or third increment. And frankly, layering just takes a lot of time. And time is the enemy of isolation. The longer that rubber dam or isolate is in the mouth, the higher chance the patient moves, the higher chance that humidity rises, and the higher chance that your bond gets compromised. There's a very strong argument to be made that because bulk fill is faster, it actually could be safer because it minimizes the window of time where things can go wrong. So does this mean that you should use bulk fill for everything? No. Well, the research also highlights the limitations. You need to use your brain. If you have a proximal box that is 7 millimeters deep, you cannot cure that in one shot. The limit is usually 4 or 5 millimeters. You still might need 2 increments in a really deep class 2. Also be careful with your curing light. Studies on depth of cure show that bulk fills cure perfectly fine at 4 millimeters if you use a quality light with adequate power. If you're using a cheap $50 light you bought on Amazon, you're probably going to have more failures. But for your bread and butter, your class 1s and 2s on molars and premolars, the research, it gives us all a green light. Now, why does this even matter to your bottom line? Well, we can do the math. Using a bulk fill technique eliminates the need to place and pack and cure multiple layers. And this saves you about 5 to 10 minutes per procedure. It doesn't sound like a lot, but let's scale it up. Let's say you do 4 fillings a day. That's up to 40 minutes saved. That's 3 hours a week, 150 hours a year. That's almost 4 weeks of full-time clinical work saved just by switching your composite material. Now, what could you do with an extra 150 hours? You could probably see more patients, definitely more new patients. You could do more high-value production, or you could just go home earlier and see your kids. This is what I mean when I say efficiency drives fulfillment. You're getting the same clinical result, verified by those great guys at the Journal of Dentistry, but you're getting your life back in the process. Now, however, there is a little catch. To make bulk fill work, your systems do have to be dialed in. You need to know which adhesive generation works best with your specific product. You need to know the exact curing times. You need to know how to cap it if you want better aesthetics. I actually created a cheat sheet for this. I broke down my exact protocol for efficient composites, including the specific materials I use and curing lights that I trust to actually penetrate that 4 millimeters. I sent that out to my newsletter subscribers recently, but I also included it as a resource for anyone who joins the newsletter today. If you want to know exactly what is in my drawer and the step-by-step sequence I use to get zero sensitivity with bulk fill, click the link in the description and sign up. It's the best way to get the practical SOPs that accompany these videos. So here's the verdict. The research says that bulk fill composites, when used according to the manufacturer's instructions, perform just as well as any incremental layering regarding the marginal integrity, the sensitivity, and longevity. It's not lazy dentistry. This is modern dentistry. The chemistry has actually improved. Technology has improved. If you're still layering every single composite because it's a rule that you learned in 2005, then you're just fighting a ghost. You're working harder than you need to, and you're taking longer than you need to for a result that is statistically the same. Give yourself permission to trust the technology. Test it out, buy a compule of reputable bulk fill material, try it on a few occlusal fillings, and check the contacts, check the aesthetics, see how much faster the appointment goes. I think you'll find that it's a game changer for your schedule and for your sanity. Now, I'd love to hear from the comments. Are you team bulk fill, or are you still kind of the old school team layering? And if you are still layering, what is the one fear that is stopping you from switching? Let me know below, and don't forget to grab that protocol from the newsletter link. Let's work together to make dentistry more fun, rewarding, and fulfilling. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for more.